like I said, we got my Actively Unwoke Substack. And today we are going to be reading an article from my Actively Unwoke Substack of a new series that I'm launching that I'm really excited about. It's called The Woke Mind. And basically, what I'm going to do in the Woke Mind series is I'm going to break down the psychology of why the woke left behaves like it does. And this is going to be like stuff people don't want to hear, because I can't tell you how often I'm asked, why do they do that? Why do they do that? I don't understand. Don't they know they're hypocrites? Why do they do that? Why do they do that? Well, a lot of times they do it because they can. They do it because their values are different than yours. They do it because the way that they see the world is fundamentally different than yours. And we cannot defeat our enemy if we do not understand them and we do not understand their perspective. And so that's what the woke mind is going to be about. It's going to be about really understanding their perspective, not trying to sugarcoat it, not trying to obfuscate it, not saying they're dumb for seeing the world the way they do. My way is right and their way is wrong, because that's like digging in your heels and saying they're just stupid and they're mentally insane. And I don't even know why we want to talk about this, Carlin, because they're obviously mentally insane. I'm sorry, bro. That's not going to help you. It is not going to help you. We need to start facing reality and becoming hinged back into it. And if you do not understand why the woke left operates the way it does, then we are doomed to lose to them. And we're not already losing by a little bit, we're losing by a lot. So something needs to change. And I want this series to be part of that. I really want people to understand this. And if you appreciate this, please share it out. Share it with your friends. Share it with your family. Use it as talking points. Direct them to my Actively Unwoke Substack. It's going to be great. Anyway, what I want to do is I want to get started. And I want to read this article and I want to hear your guys' feedback on it. And we are going to talk about the woke mind. Why you should never expect the woke left to behave logically. Please mount that like button if you are ready for this article. And I can't wait to hear what you guys have to think about it. Why? I understand why people struggle to wrap their heads around the woke left. Oftentimes, people come to me desperately trying to understand why they do what they do, since it all seems completely illogical. Why do they refuse to acknowledge evidence when you show it to them? Why do they think it's okay to teach sex to kindergarteners? Why can't they define a woman? And so on and so forth. They believe there must be a logical answer to all of these questions. That's natural. Their brain is desperate to identify patterns that can easily understand to help them make sense of this experience. That's part of our survival mechanism. Our brain is constantly analyzing our environment to make sure nothing is out of the ordinary that will put us in danger. But this search for logic is what the woke left will fail every single time for one simple reason. The woke left does not value behaving logically. I'm going to say it again, and we're going to pause right here, because this is the most important point that you all need to take away from this. The woke left does not value behaving logically. Every single person in this world has different values. Most people in this world are going to have different values than you have. And when people have different values than you have, it can be really easy to say, well, why don't they just have my values? My values are clearly better than their values, or they're insane for having the values they do. Why don't they care about the things I care about? My things are obviously the most important things. What I really need people to understand, and you need to detach yourself from your ego to understand this. Just because you value something at a certain level does not mean that other people are going to share that value. And it doesn't make them a bad person. It doesn't make them mentally ill. It doesn't make them a woke leftist. It just means that they have different values than you. And we have to resist the urge to demonize every single person that has different values than us. We have to resist that urge to demonize them, because the minute that we start demonizing them is the minute that we start behaving antagonistically towards them. And it's also the minute that we start to get defensive and we stop looking for understanding because we're only interested in like defeating the enemy. Or we also, it can also make us self-conscious to say, why doesn't someone share my values? Aren't I good enough? Am I doing something wrong? What do they know that I don't? Like, we can start to actually feel inferior to someone if we judge that to be different, or if we judge that to be bad. We might say, well, like, why aren't I part of the cool kids club? Why don't I have those values? I think one of the most important mindfulness techniques that I teach is that you have to stop judging things as good or bad. Most things are not objectively good or objectively bad. They just are. Just because something is different does not objectively make it bad. And that is true when we're talking about different value systems. Now, we can argue, and probably should, about what is the logical outcome of what the woke left values. Okay. And we can say that's objectively bad. But that's not what we're doing right now. What we're doing right now is to understand that their values are fundamentally different and not passing judgment on that. They're different. They're not better. They're not worse. That's not good. It's not bad. It's not right. It's not wrong. It doesn't make them part of the cool kids club. It doesn't make you part of the cool kids club. It doesn't make them part of the loser society. It doesn't make them part of the loser society. It's just different. Okay? They have different values than you, and they do not value behaving logically. And therefore, if we accept that the woke left does not have behaving logically at the top of their list of priorities, then we have to acknowledge that expecting them to behave logically is a fool's errand. It's like expecting a cat to behave like a dog. You can hope and dream and wish upon a star all you like, but you can't make a cat behave like a dog. It's a cat. You have to accept a cat for what it is and be realistic that it will not change into a dog just because you want it to. And in the same way that you cannot change a cat into a dog, you cannot change a woke leftist into a conservative, okay? Or you cannot change a woke leftist into a libertarian. Now, they may evolve over time. They may do what happened to me, which is they have some jarring moment of reality in which they come to the conclusion that maybe I'm not going down the most best and noble path. All right? They might come to that on their own, and they might evolve out of where they are right now and end up in a different place, but you can't force that. For all these people who say, what do I need to do to red pill my friends, my family, my coworkers, my brother, my sister, my husband, my wife? What do I need to do to red pill them? You can't do anything. You cannot force someone to change their mind. You can't browbeat them. You can't hold their head in front of the evidence and make them look at it. You can't make someone change their mind. The very best thing that you can do is to plant seeds and hope that those seeds over time cultivate and lead the person to making the choice to see the world differently. But if they do it, it will be their choice. It will not be yours. It will not be because of something you did. It will not be because you wanted them to. It will not be because of anything other than they made the choice to see the world differently and they chose to evolve. Now that might seem like it might seem like, well, why am I even trying then? Well, because you're still planting seeds. You're still planting seeds. There's nothing wrong with planting seeds. Planting seeds is a necessary way to accelerate the whole process, right? So it's not futile, and I would never argue that it is. I wouldn't be trying to make this my full-time job if it was, right? But I want you to be really realistic that just like you can't make a cat a dog, you can't take a woke leftist and force that red pill down their throat. You can't do it. It won't work. They are what they are. They value what they value. And the woke left does not value logic. They do not see virtue in being logical. They will never engage you in a logical conversation. And that's because they covet power above all else. Not logic, power. And if you want to understand this, I have another article on my Substack. It's called The Four Goals of the Woke Left, which are gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. Those are for always and ever for their four goals. Gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their little Marxist utopia. If you want to know more about that, you can find that article on Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com and read more. So now, if we're on the same page that the primary goal of the woke left is to gain power, we need to take the next logical step in the equation. Well, this isn't going to be productive. So this person says values, and then you have the way to go about it. I will never forgive them for what they put us through. That's not going to help you. I understand why you're saying that. But again, you must have missed the part where I said we need to detach from our own ego and our own value system for a moment in order to really understand why they're doing what they're doing. I understand why people are angry. What I need you to understand is that being angry will only lead to them winning. It will not lead to us winning. It will lead to us continuing to make mistakes because we're so pissed off at what they've done that we don't emotionally detach from the situation and recognize what is required to change the situation. So I'm not trying to pick on you because it's a completely understandable reaction to feel that way. I get it. I really do. I'm pissed off at them too. But our goal here is not to feed our own outrage addictions, because I promise you guys, if you are addicted to outrage, you are not going to be a valuable asset in the fight against the woke left. You're just not. So we need to resist the urge to feed our outrage addictions so we can look at it from a detached perspective. And being angry and saying, I will never forgive you, is not going to contribute to that. So now, if we're on the same page that the primary goal of the woke left is to gain power, we need to take the next logical step in the equation. Does a logical conversation about their beliefs lead to the woke left gaining power, or does it lead to them losing power? Okay? If we know that their top priority, the thing that they covet above all else, is gaining as much power as possible, then that is the standard by which we need to measure their behavior. Does having a logical conversation lead to them gaining more power, or does having a logical conversation lead to them losing more power? And Bot is correct. In most cases, it will lead to them losing power. So let's see how this plays out. Let's return to the questions I offered at the beginning of this essay and evaluate whether answering them logically will gain or lose the woke left power. So question number 1, why do they refuse to acknowledge evidence when you show it to them? That's something that's going to make a lot of people angry, right? It's perfectly understandable that people would be angry about that. What, like, I can show you evidence that critical race theory is taught in K through 12 schools. Why won't you look at it? I can show you detransitioner video after detransitioner video after detransitioner video. Why won't you look at it? It's understandable that people get angry when the woke left ignores evidence that is literally put directly in front of their face. But what you need to understand is they're ignoring it because it does not serve their values to embrace it. It's classic confirmation bias. It is classic confirmation bias, which is people are only going to look at evidence that supports the conclusion that they've already come to. They are going to ignore evidence that does not lead to the conclusion that they've already come to. They literally can't see it. Try not to judge them as harshly, because again, judging them harshly isn't actually going to be productive. But just understand that they literally cannot see it. If you show them evidence that critical race theory is taught in K through 12 schools, acknowledging that it's critical race theory will lose them power. They would be admitting what we already know is true, that they are using public schools to push a political agenda, which exposes their game. They can't give you an honest, logical answer to the question. Instead, they say critical race theory isn't taught in K through 12 schools, or critical race theory is just teaching accurate history. Because that is what they are required to say to serve their highest virtue, which is maintaining power. And James, you are absolutely correct about this. I agree with you. Confirmation and bias exist in both the left and the right. 1000%. You will hear no argument from me. It exists on both sides, and both sides should check that shit. So next question we had is, why do they think it's okay to teach sex to kindergarteners? Well, if you ask a woke leftist why they are integrating sex into classrooms in elementary school through classroom decoration, books, lesson plans, and teachers' personal stories, they acknowledge that they believe it's okay to talk to 5-year-olds about, and they acknowledge that they believe it's okay to talk to 5-year-olds about sex. That's not a good look, right? If you say to them, why are you teaching sex to kindergarteners? They're going to be like, we're not teaching sex to kindergartners. What are they talking about? Because if they looked at the evidence that that's exactly what they're doing, and they said, yeah, we're teaching sex to kindergarteners, that's not a good look, yo. That's not a good look at all. You can't say that. That would be admitting they are groomers, that they're the groomers that James Lindsay says they are. They can't allow that. So, of course, they can't do that because it would lose them power and hand a win to their political opponent. Instead, they're going to deflect and they're going to say they aren't teaching sex, they're teaching gender, which they distinguish from sex. Okay, are you guys following along with where we're going? If the most logical conclusion of the conversation is that the woke left is going to lose power by engaging in a good faith discussion, they're not going to do it because maintaining their power is the most important virtue, not having a good faith discussion. So, why can't they define a woman? That seems to be pretty easy, right? Why can't they define a woman? Well, you may see the pattern here, but the reason they can't define a woman is because defining a woman as an adult human female would lead to them losing power. Admitting there are two biological sexes would itself lead to them losing power. Admitting there's such a thing as biological sex at all would lead to them losing power. Yes, they will say, trust the science, and there is no biological sex within the same breath without any sense of irony, because the goal is not to construct a logical thought. Therefore, this irony doesn't register as a problem. And again, this is one of those things. This drove the conservative right crazy. Why can't they just define a woman? And the conservative right focused so much on why won't they just do it? Why won't they just admit that women are adult human females? Why can't they just do what we want them to do? This perturbed the conservative right so much that they drove themselves crazy in pondering the why. Why won't they just do it? Why won't they just do it? Are we going mad? It was probably because they thought they were going mad that they drove themselves mad as a result, right? When instead what they should have done is just said they're just they're a power hungry mob. And if they acknowledge that there are biological women or that biological sex exists at all, they're giving their own power away. They'll never do that. Because once you acknowledge that, it may not be the answer you want. And I understand why it's not the answer that you want. But once you just acknowledge the reality of the situation, that allows you a whole new freedom to be able to interact with them in a way where you can actually make progress. If you just say, I know they're not going to acknowledge what a woman is, I know they're not going to acknowledge that biological sex exists. That way you can start to navigate it and start to set them up. Rand Paul is the master at this, by the way. Ted Cruz does a really good job of it as well. Because if you know and accept this and you focus on the acceptance and you can say, okay, I know that Ketanji, what is her name? Ketanji Brown Jackson. God, I probably just butchered a Supreme Court justice's name. If I know that Ketanji Brown Jackson is never, ever, 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 ever going to say that there is such a thing as an adult human female, then I can use it against her. And they did. That was one of the few times that the conservative right was like, I know you're not going to define what a woman is, so I'm going to ask you to define what a woman is because you're going to give some boneheaded answer that I can then use against you. Now, they weren't successful in that particular experimentation, but they were on the right track. That's how you acknowledge it. You go into the discussion saying, I know you're not going to define what a woman is. And so I'm going to ask you to do just that on the world stage where everyone can see it. And then use that against them. Because in that instance, Ketanji Brown Jackson was not the target of that. She was the one who was asked the question. But the target audience of that is like every single normie that's like, you can't, why can't you define a woman? She was not the audience. Changing Ketanji Brown Jackson's mind was not the point. This is another mistake the conservative right makes. They think that the point is changing the mind of the woke leftists. It is never about changing their mind. They're not going to change their mind. Changing their mind would, again, get rid of their power. So why would they do that? Why would they give up their power like that? That is simply foolish, guys. It is foolish to accept that they're going to give their power away. So instead, you go into it with a detached mentality and you say, I know how you're going to answer this question because there's only one possible way you can answer this question. And then I'm going to use the answer against you. Not to change your mind, not to change anyone's mind on the woke left, but to make sure I'm waking up as many people as possible. Now, Matt Walsh did not understand this. Ted Cruz understood this. Matt Walsh did not. And I'm going to tell you what the difference was. Matt Walsh made a movie that only targeted people who already agreed with him. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Not a single person's mind was changed because of Matt Walsh's movie. Exactly 0 minds were changed with his movie because he released the movie behind a paywall and only made it available to people who already agreed with him. That made no sense. What a wasted effort. Well, I mean, it was great for them. They made a lot of money. They made a lot of money replaying talking points to people who already agreed with them. But no minds were changed. So what a shame. What a shame. Anyway, that is a different story for a different day. Being illogical itself gains power. This is another thing that the conservative right does not understand. The woke left gains power over you when they are illogical and they piss you off. The woke left is completely aware that these tactics piss you off, conservatives. They want you to say, that's not what I asked, or you didn't answer the question, or how can you possibly believe there's no such thing as a woman? That's a feature, not a bug. They know that frustrating you destabilizes you and takes away your ability to think clearly. By the way, the same is true of them. If you frustrate them, you're going to piss them off and you're going to make them do exactly the same thing they're doing to you. So it works both ways. They know to onlookers, you look like you're the one in hysterics when you get frustrated. They know that the act of frustrating you will gain them even more power. It gives them more power over you because you walked right into it and they were able to exert control over you. It also gives them power over any onlookers. Remember, when you're posting on social media, people are always watching because they're drawing them in to their fucked up ideological or illogical world. I'm going to read that last sentence again because I butchered it. I apologize. Because it also gives them power. And it also gives them power over any onlookers. Remember, when you're posting on social media, people are always watching because they're drawing them into their fucked up, illogical world. Your discomfort is the point. It's part of why they do it. James Jones, so how do we piss them off? Well, I wrote a little book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. And I actually spend time talking about how you piss them off in the book. But we'll talk about that another day, James Jones, I promise you. But not for today. We're not talking about the how today. We're just talking about the why. There is only one exception to this rule. None of this is to say that the woke left never uses logic. They do. However, they will only do it under one specific set of circumstances. And you should know those circumstances by now. When it benefits them to do so. If you present them with a scenario and the most logical answer also gains them power in the situation, they will be logical. For instance, What if you're at a school board meeting in extremely woke Burlington, Vermont, where the far left controls local politics, and there's not a single non socialist on the school board? If you ask, does budgeting based on equity mean that we are funding students differently based on their race, believing that that may seem kind of racist, because it is, you're forgetting your audience. So if you go into a school board meeting in Burlington, Vermont, where again, they're legitimately communist, okay? And you think that you're gonna ask a question to this school board to expose their hypocrisy. And you go in and you're like, isn't like budgeting based on equity funding people differently based on the color of their skin? And you do that thinking, I'm going to make this school seem really effing racist. Now, you have asked the right question. The question is correct, but the audience is not. Because the audience that you are asking the question to doesn't think there's anything wrong with this. The school board doesn't think there's anything wrong with this. The community doesn't think there's anything wrong with this. You might get onesies or twosies here and there, but by and large, you're going to be asking this question to people who think there's nothing wrong with funding people based on their skin color. They don't think it's racist. They think it's activism and justice. And you have to be realistic again about this. You have to be able to view this from a detached perspective to say, I know that these people don't see anything wrong with this. Yes, and then you do have to record it, Alex. Excellent point. You should record it. Absolutely. The woke leftist you're talking to is going to logically know that the school board will support this idea, and they're going to say yes. And then they'll use the opportunity to follow up and really nail it home by saying something the school board would logically agree with, like, some communities need more to get ahead than others, and therefore it's only fair to give those communities what they need. That's a completely logical conversation that leads to the woke ideology being ingrained in the school budgeting process because they behaved logically based on the people listening with the specific goal of gaining more power in the situation. So does everyone see what happened? The woke left will behave logically. They know what logic is. They're not stupid. And this is why the conservative right needs to really stop saying they just all have a mental illness. The woke left does not have a mental illness. It is not a collective delusion. It is not that. They just have different values. They understand logic. They understand reason. They understand taking a principled position. They just disagree on what the highest priorities are. And so if you go into a conversation saying they won't be logical at all, well, no, if it gains them power, they will be logical. If it gains them support, they will be logical. But not if it won't. Never confuse your values with their values. Again, James, I agree with you that everything the left does, the right does too. I agree with that. You will not find an argument with me there. But right now we're focusing on the woke left. Never confuse your values with their values. People have different values and different ways they see the world. You value logic. You think that's the best way to live and a good idea. The woke left disagrees. You do not share the same values. In discussions such as this is not a debate on whose values are better. You think yours are more valuable. They think theirs are more valuable. Screaming, "Why aren't you being logical?" at the sky isn't going to change the situation. You must observe it from a detached perspective to know that a cat is a cat and you can't wish it or scream it or re it into being a dog. Just because you want the woke left to value logic over power does not make them do so. You must accept them as they are and for what they truly value on what their behaviors tell us they value. It is illogical to do otherwise. They are what they are, and it will not change anytime soon. Accept this fundamental fact, and you'll be a whole lot more effective in dealing with them. Resist it, and you'll continue to scream into the sky in frustration. And that's it for my article. Why you should never expect the woke left to behave logically. I'd like to just take a beat and ask if anyone in the chat has any questions or comments about the articles or the article that we've read so far or the principles that we've discussed. Let me take a drink of water while you do. And I want to say to James's point again, James, you will find no one on the internet that screams more than me that the right does everything that the left does. If you think this is new to me, like you are new to my content, man. I scream about this all the time. That I think that there is woke on. I actually write about this in my book. There's woke on the right, just like there's woke on the left. Right? Woke is about authoritarianism. It's about using the power of the state to force your values on everyone else. Now, the problem is, like, I don't think that the Republicans and Democrats are different parties. I don't think that the right is fundamentally different than the left. I'm not a conservative. But the problem is that the woke left is more dangerous right now because they have power. If the woke right had power, I'd be screaming about them to high heaven. But they're not more dangerous right now because they don't have power. Graphically, Alex says, you are only ever fighting for the center. Always remember that. That is a great point, Alex. Justin says, I feel like I've been making the argument about how libertarians can't convert people because our values are different for years and no one listens. Well, that's because they're in a constant state of like, why don't you agree with me? Why don't you can convert people? You absolutely can convert people, but you have to start from a place of understanding that their values are different than yours, and that's why you need to convert them in the first place. So you have to work on changing their value set. You have to try to convert them in a different way. The right did invent cancel culture. That's true. That is true. They often try to corner us. How can we get out of that? Well, that's a different article for a different day, Jennifer. But I will say that I think how we get out of it is that you have to stop letting them define the rules you play by. Just like you can't define their values for them, they can't define your values for you. You're under no obligation to accept the rules they want you to play by. None at all. And we'll talk more about that as this series unfolds. I just did gratitude always, but you're going to troll in my chat. I'm going to end up blocking you soon because I'm not putting up with that shit anymore. I have done my time. I have done my time putting up with internet bullshit. 2023 is going to be the year I no longer put up with internet bullshit or nonsense. I'll tell you that right now. Graphically, Alex says part of it is the emotional impact on the audience. Part of what I did with Hunter was emotionally disprove the left is freedom, loving, and sweet narrative. Hunter made center leftist bristle. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right, guys, so that's the first article I wanted to read to you today. That's the more serious article, but this is part of the Woke Mind series that I'm launching over on carlin.substack.com. My goal over the next couple of months or so is I would like to get 1,000 new monthly subscribers, paying subscribers, to make this something that I can continue and make freely available. Now, I would really like to keep all of the articles on my Substack open to the public for free. But I'm going to ask that if you enjoy my work that I'm doing on this Substack, then please consider supporting it either with a $5 a month donation on Substack, which you can process right as part of your subscription. You can get an annual subscription as well if you want to. You can join my locals for $5 a month. You can join my Patreon for $5 a month. All that information is in the description below. And if I can get 1,000 new paying supporters, that would be amazing. That would allow me free up so much of my time to be able to focus my energy and attention on producing more of this content, writing more articles, doing more podcasts, stuff like that. And it'll allow me to spend less of my time doing other things, which would be really, really great.